Ecthelion built and led the House of the Fountain, slaying Gothmog, the Lord of Balrogs, as well as a few others. At first glance, he seemed to have done more when compared to Glorfindel the Golden Flower. But why was the latter able to reincarnate and live in Middle-earth throughout the Second and Third Ages? There are at least a few possible reasons as to why Glorfindel reincarnated while Ecthelion stayed in the halls of Mondos, that Ecthelion simply didn't want to, that Glorfindel had other qualities and honors aside from the instance of simply killing Balrogs, that Glorfindel was under Manwë's ban during the time of his death and decision, or last but not least the writing of his character in the First and Third Ages. First, one possible reason could be that Ecthelion didn't want to reincarnate simply. It is said that elves can reincarnate if they wished, though it could be delayed by Manwë. Thus, it is possible that Glorfindel may have requested by wishing for it, while Ecthelion did not. Their death by any injury to their bodies so severe that it could not be healed, and the disembodiment of their spirits was an unnatural and grievous matter. It was therefore the duty of the Valar, by command of the One, to restore them to life if they desired it. But this restoration could be withheld or delayed by Manwë, for some grave reason, such as very evil deeds, or any works of malice of which a disembodied spirit remained unrepentant. Since not as much is known about Ecthelion of the Fountain's desire to reincarnate, we can conclude that he possibly wanted to stay in the halls of Mondos. As Glorfindel's reincarnation meant that he had to remain in Middle-earth in this bodily form, it is possible that Ecthelion didn't want to remain in Middle-earth after exhausting his body and soul slaying multiple Balrogs. After all, the Balrogs were originally part of the Mire, which are naturally strong, so both characters would be considered significantly stronger than many others. Another reason why Glorfindel could be chosen over Ecthelion to reincarnate and go back to Middle-earth is that he happened to kill the Balrog that would be closest to Tor and Idril, and their son Eärendil, which doesn't necessarily mean that this particular Balrog would need to be the biggest, baddest Balrog there was, but more about fulfilling the purposes of the Valar. More important, Glorfindel had sacrificed his life in defending the fugitives from the wreck of Gondolin against the demon out of Thangorodrim, and so enabling Tor and Idril, daughter of Turgon, and their child Eärendil to escape and seek refuge at the mouths of Sirion. Though he could not have known the importance of this, and would have defended them even had they been fugitives of any rank, this deed was of vital importance to the designs of the Valar. It is therefore entirely in keeping with the general design of the Silmarillion to describe the subsequent history of Glorfindel thus. After his purging of any guilt that he had incurred in the rebellion, he was released from Mondos, and Manwë restored him. He then became again a living incarnate person, but was permitted to dwell in the Blessed Realm, for he had regained the primitive innocence and grace of the Eldar. For long years he remained in Valinor, in reunion with the Eldar who had not rebelled, and in the companionship of the Mire. To these he had now become almost an equal, for though he was an incarnate to whom a bodily form not made or chosen by himself was necessary, his spiritual power had been greatly enhanced by his self-sacrifice. It is clear that this is mainly about Glorfindel, though it is natural to wonder why Ecthelion didn't get the same result of reincarnation. However, it is clear that there were other considerations to be made aside from the type of Balrog that was slain, as the Valar saw that Glorfindel saved Tor and Idril during the process, or in times surrounding it. Meanwhile, not much is known about Ecthelion's deeds aside from killing Balrogs, possibly because the Fall of Gondolin was never completed in the full, published form. But it's not to discount Ecthelion's deed of slaying Balrogs, especially as it is clear that both were great deeds. Now these had sustained a terrible conflict in the Great Market to the east of the city, where a force of orcs led by Balrogs came on them at unawares as they marched by a circuitous way to the fight about the gate. This they did to surprise the foe upon his left flank, but were themselves ambuscaded. They fought them bitterly for hours till a firedrake new come from the breach overwhelmed them, and Glorfindel cut his way out very hardly and with few men. But that place with its stores and its goodly things of fine workmanship was a waste of flames. One can argue that Ecthelion did the same, as by killing Gothmog and 3 other Balrogs earlier, he would have the greater feat when compared to Glorfindel with the same reasoning to save Tor. Of those demons of power, Ecthelion slew 3, for the brightness of his sword cleft the iron of them and did hurt to their fire, and they wreathed, yet of the leap of the axe, Dramberleg, that was swung by the hand of Tor, were they still more afraid, for it sang like the rush of eagle's wings in the air and took death as it fell, and 5 of them went down before it. But so it is that few cannot fight always against the many, and Ecthelion's left arm got a sore rent from the whip of the Balrogs and his shield fell to earth, even as that dragon of fire drew nigh amid the ruin of the walls. Then Ecthelion must lean on Tor, and Tor might not leave him, though the very feet of the trampling beast were upon them, and they were like to be overborne. But Tor hewed at the foot of the creature so that flames spouted forth, and that serpent screamed, lashing with its tail, and many of both orcs and Noldli got their death therefrom. Now Tor gathered his might and lifted Ecthelion, and amid a remnant of the folk got thereunder and escaped the drake. Yet dire was the killing of men that beast had wrought, and the Gondolin were sorely shaken. However, Manwë's ban could have played into this reincarnation, though it seems to be more about how he reacted to the ban and surrounding the events of the ban. Now Glorfindel of Gondolin was one of the exiled Noldor, rebels against the authority of Manwë, and they were all under a ban imposed by him. They could not return in bodily form to the Blessed Realm. Manwë, however, was not bound by his own ordinances, and being still the supreme ruler of the kingdom of Arda, could set them aside when he saw fit. From what is said of Glorfindel in the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings, it is evident that he was an elder of high and noble spirit. It can be assumed that, though he left Valinor in a host of Turgon, and so incurred the ban, he did so reluctantly because of kinship with Turgon and allegiance to him, and had no part in the kinslaying of Alcolonde. Thus, maybe the ban had much to do with the reincarnation, as the Valar had to wait until after the ban. This reincarnation came with the condition that he was to remain in Middle-earth. And lastly, it could be simply because Glorfindel had a plot in the Third Age. Tolkien wrote his character in the Silmarillion in the First Age and Lord of the Rings in the Third Age separately. However, after writing the 2 plots, he realized that Glorfindel died in the First Age, so he would work out how Glorfindel reincarnated into his character in the Third Age, the one who assisted Frodo in escaping the Nazgul. Tolkien also originally intended for Glorfindel to tell of his ancestry of Gondolin at the Council of Elrond, but that was later revoked. However, the idea of reincarnation was already developed by the time Tolkien realized that Glorfindel died earlier, so he figured that Glorfindel would reincarnate and return when Sauron forged the One Ring in the Second Age. At the Council of Elrond, but that was later revoked. However, the idea of reincarnation was already developed by the time Tolkien realized it. Yeah, I mean, that's